are the Xenomorph. Introduced to us by Ridley Scott in his 1979 sci-fi horror classic Alien, this creature has been terrorising us with various levels of effectiveness over the course of 9 films ever since. And in 2025 the franchise finally graced us with a small screen presence in the form of Alien Earth, and at the time of writing has been doing a rather great job courtesy of Noah Hawley and his team. We have all sorts of science in these films, from cloning and androids to long distance space travel and cryosleep, yet I think it would be pretty foolish to make a video about this franchise and not talk about that titular creature, the one designed to remind you that in space no one can hear you scream. The origins of the Xenomorph, Internecavus raptus, are complicated, with no real consensus due to the complications in the timeline and the information presented to us via the films, but what is clear is a link between what we know as the Xenomorph and Mundus Gubnavani, otherwise known as the Engineers or the Space Jockeys. Thus I'm going to present the theory that I believe makes the most sense, but if you agree or disagree, please feel free to inform me via the comments section below. Though I will say that this is not just a theory that only I have thought of, as I did manage to find a Reddit thread that lays out almost exactly how I too have mapped out this franchise in my brain. In Prometheus we see the inside of an engineered temple, where there is a clear mural of a xenomorph-like creature. It is this that suggests to me that the engineers found the ancestral xenomorphs throughout their journeys across the stars, and using their vast scientific knowledge managed to create the black ooze that we then see and is quite important to the Prometheus plot. We know that the engineers are interested in genetic engineering, and that this is why Elizabeth Shaw calls them engineers after all. And so coming across an alien species that has the capacity to adapt its own genetic structure depending on the host in which it finds itself must have been incredibly tantalising for them. They then take the xenomorph eggs to various scientific research sites across the galaxy, allowing different members of their community to research these creatures in different ways. That offers an explanation as to how we observe the engineer spacecraft packed with xenomorph eggs on LV-426 visited by the Nostromo, and LV-223 visited many years prior by the Prometheus. We know that on LV-426 these eggs remain somewhat dormant and that not much happens there, but on LV-223 research very much takes place, and from these xenomorphs the engineers are able to create this black ooze, a substance that allows them to genetically manipulate any life form to which it is exposed. This is such a monumental discovery that the engineers were able to build an entire civilization around this, visiting distant planets and exposing it to the ooze to create new life. And this is what we see at the start of Prometheus, and would offer an explanation as to why we see that very large mural in the temple in Prometheus. Upon the arrival of the science vessel Prometheus, the Weyland Corporation synthetic David becomes somewhat obsessed with this ooze and develops the need to outlive and outdo his creator Peter Weyland, and he does this by creating the perfect organism, and we see the fruits of his labour in that film's sequel, Alien Covenant. Using information collected by the engineers, which is highlighted in the novelisation rather than the film itself, David has been able to reverse engineer the ooze into Plagiaris linisteris, the highly aggressive praetomorph. Whether these praetomorphs are more akin to those ancestral xenomorphs the engineers originally found is unclear, as there are life cycle differences between Plagiaris linisteris and Innovicius raptus. It is possible that the engineers were able to create the former from the latter themselves, and it is this species of alien from which the black ooze was able to be derived. We know that such genetic reverse engineering is capable in this universe, and done so by humans. This is what allows the xenomorphs in Alien Romulus to be created by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. This timeline of events and the explanation that neither the engineers nor David created the original xenomorph species allows for the incorporation of the Yautja, the predator species, and their ongoing battle between themselves and the xenomorphs. Indeed, David could not have created the species that they themselves had managed to capture and imprison beneath the earth, as seen in Alien vs Predator many thousands of years prior to David's own creation. Not all xenomorphs that burst out of an individual's chest are created equally. The species has a complex caste system similar to that of ants and bees, so before we take a look at some of the biology of the xenomorph and their very unique characteristics, let us detour slightly into the social system that they have created. At the bottom of the barrel we have the drone, the basic xenomorph, sometimes referred to as the stage 4 xenomorph. These are the most common class. It's their role to care for and maintain the hive, the latter role also meaning that it is the drones that go out and hunt for new hosts for which the colony can use to expand. The designation of stage 4, with stage 1 being the egg, stage 2 the facehugger, 3 the chest burster, and then 4 the full adult, also implies the additional stages of growth and development, and it has been reported that this only occurs under instruction from the queen of the hive, which we'll get to later. Pheromone signals from the head of the hive will cause the drone to develop into one of two very opposing roles. The first is the weaver, sometimes called the worker, a smaller and less violent form of xenomorph that will use its secretions to physically build the vast hives like that observed in Aliens. They also have a different appearance than the others. Other than their height, these xenomorphs appear greyish white rather than the black that we associate with the species in general. The warrior class is the opposite side of that coin, adapted to kill more so than the drone. Yet whilst the drone will go out and find new hosts, warriors will stay back as their primary role is to defend the hive from threats such as nosy humans. The warrior class also allows for career progression, as they can be developed under instruction from the queen once again into a Praetorian stage 6 xenomorph, a royal guard, a much larger, much more heavily armoured warrior whose sole purpose is to protect their leader. And of course at the top of the food chain we have the queen, much larger than all the other castes, especially if you consider that her royal guard averages around 16 feet in length and this queen can reportedly be up to 100 feet in height. She is also much smarter than the rest, knowing what the hive needs at all times, and thus can use those previously mentioned pheromone secretions to dictate the lower castes and what they should become. They are of course also the egg layers, and it's predominantly this reason that the Praetorian caste even exists, as when the queen is connected to the egg sac she is largely immobile and thus incredibly vulnerable to attack. Should the queen die, a Praetorian can take up the mantle of becoming a new queen, but if this does not occur, specialised royal facehuggers, which are larger and darker than the average facehugger, can implant an embryo into a host that contains within it a genetic copy of the previous queen. As a result, unlike a normal xenomorph that shows adaptations based on the host organism, a queen's embryo will hatch and evolve exclusively into a queen so that a new hive can be created. All xenomorph species and subspecies are parasitoid organisms, a designation given to organisms in which the larval stages develop on or within a different host organism that ultimately dies when those larvae hatch. So if you come across a xenomorph egg, what is it that's going to happen to you? The eggs of the xenomorph species are more than just an egg, which is why they are considered the stage 1 xenomorph organism. The eggs contain a basic nervous structure along with pressure and temperature sensors on their surface, which allows them to detect a nearby viable new host. Upon detection of an organism, a bioelectrical signal is passed to the inert facehugger within, basically transferring some sort of life essence from the egg to the facehugger, which will then leap out and attach itself to your face. The facehugger is coated in a neuromuscular toxin dissolved in DMSO, a chemical used by medics today as a method of delivering transdermal medication. Thus, skin-to-skin contact with it renders you paralysed. This gives the facehugger time to insert its proboscis down your esophagus, creating an acceptable atmosphere to insert what will inevitably become a brand new chestburster. It is here that things get complicated once again, as the conventional theory based on published material like Alien: The Cold Forge is that the facehugger didn't inject an organism, but rather a mutagenic substance that has been suggested to be analogous to the black ooze that the engineers were able to create, and it is this that goes on to create the host-adapted organism. Yet in Alien Earth Episode 4 we are presented with a very different scenario in which the synthetic Hirsch is able to extract a tadpole-like life cycle stage from the facehugger, which then goes on to produce an adult. Could this suggest a new subspecies of Internecavus raptus perhaps? Or is it that the tadpole from which the ooze originates? As this remains unclear, we will stick with what is currently understood, as this black substance restructures host cells, offering an explanation as to why the adult xenomorph shares some degree of resemblance of the host from which it emerged. The use of your own cells has the added benefit of preventing an immune response that may endanger the growing xenomorph, as your immune system, under normal circumstances, should not attack your own tissue. The facehugger remains attached to you for anywhere from 20 minutes to 16 hours post-infection until it can sense a secure and growing implantation, at which point it will release you, crawl away and subsequently die. Inside of you, however, over a reported period of between 1 to 24 hours, the xenomorph will grow and be ready to hatch. The now appropriately named chestburster releases a series of enzymes that begin to soften and degrade the surrounding tissue and bone, allowing the organism to more easily force its way out through your sternum and into the wider world, where it will quickly try and find an escape route that is difficult to follow. For you, sadly, you're dead, as the emergence event causes irreparable damage to your chest cavity and the organs therein. On planet Earth here in 2025, we don't have any xenomorphs running around, or at the very least nobody has survived an encounter with one in order to be able to report it. But there are plenty of species amongst us right now that share a lot of similarities, the greatest number of these being Hymenoptera, or wasps, so much so that they're thought to represent 10% of all life on the planet, with somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million different species. Like the xenomorph, these are parasitoid wasps that will plant their offspring either inside of or on the surface of a particular host species, with the range of hosts being just as diverse as the wasps themselves. Thus we will take a quick look at a couple of these Hymenoptera, one implanting their young internally and the other externally, to see how they compare to one of the greatest killing machines known to, hopefully just fictional, Pepsis grossa, one of the many wasps of the Pepsis genus that are otherwise known as tarantula hawks. If the name didn't give it away, these wasps hunt on the Theraphosidae family of tarantulas. They are also an example of an ectoparasitoid, laying their eggs on the outside of the host. These wasps are able to find their tarantula target, and using their sting they are able to paralyze the spider, much like the xenomorph and its own paralytic secretions. Not happy to just lay their egg in the here and now, the tarantula hawk will drag the frozen but very much still living spider down into a hole, again showing similarities to xenomorphs, as we occasionally see situations in which the host organism is brought further into the hive to permit impregnation rather than being killed outright. It's within this burrow that the female wasp will lay its egg on the abdomen of the spider, and once it's done so it will leave, the spider none the wiser to the fate that will soon befall it. When the larvae hatch from the egg, they begin to consume the spider, which I again emphasize is still very much alive, and these wasp larvae will purposely avoid vital organs so that this very much suffering tarantula will continue to survive and provide additional nutrients. During this process, the larvae will shed and grow until eventually the spider is completely consumed, and they will go ahead and weave themselves a cocoon and undergo a metamorphosis to emerge as a fully grown tarantula hawk. And if that all didn't sound horrifying enough, you'll be pleased to know that the sting of the Pepsis grossa is considered to be one of the most painful experiences a human can have, having a rating of 4 out of 4 on the Schmidt-Sting Pain Index. It isn't all bad for us humans, however, as some parasitoid wasps can be used for our own benefit, especially in the realm of agriculture. Microplitis demolitor is an endoparasitoid, which, much like the xenomorph, this species of wasp will implant its progeny inside the target host organism, in this instance the larval stages of Lepidoptera, more commonly known as caterpillars. It's not just eggs that are being implanted by this species of wasp, as it has miraculously evolved simultaneously alongside a brachyvirus, and once the host caterpillar is infected with this virus, the viral genome will be expressed by caterpillar cells to produce proteins that are advantageous for the maturing wasp eggs. Much like the tarantula, these eggs will hatch and the wasp larvae will consume the caterpillar from within, emerging from the host and spinning a cocoon in which the mature wasp will emerge. Somewhat analogous to the xenomorph we see in Alien Romulus. But why is this advantageous for us? Well, first and foremost, Microplitis demolitor is not able to sting us or implant its eggs in us, which is certainly a benefit, but this parasitic relationship they have with caterpillars makes them perfect vectors for agriculture, acting as both fertilizers for crops and as a biological form as pest control. You could make the argument that the xenomorph is also a form of pest control designed to remove the greatest pest in the galaxy, humanity. Thank you for listening.